On the evening of March 27, 2026, the sense of security at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia was just, well, shattered. This sprawling military installation, considered one of the most heavily fortified American outposts in the entire Middle East, came under a fierce and coordinated assault. A barrage of Iranian ballistic missiles and explosive-laden drones rained down on the base, overwhelming the sophisticated layers of air defense systems designed to protect it. For the American personnel stationed there, it was a terrifying confirmation that even their strongest fortresses were vulnerable. The attack marked a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict, demonstrating Iran's growing capability to strike with precision and force deep within enemy territory, a place that was supposed to be safe. The strike was not a simple, haphazard volley of rockets. Instead, it was a complex operation, meticulously planned to penetrate the Patriot missile batteries and other defensive shields that ring the base. Iran launched the attack in waves, using a mix of slower-moving drones to distract and saturate the defense systems, followed by faster, more powerful ballistic missiles aimed at high-value targets. This strategy proved devastatingly effective. The air defense crews on the ground were forced to make impossible choices, trying to prioritize which incoming threats to intercept as their limited supply of interceptor missiles dwindled with each passing second. It was the third major attack on Prince Sultan Air Base in less than a month, and by far the most destructive. The event sent shockwaves through the United States military command in the region. For weeks, the war effort had been portrayed as a series of decisive victories for the United States and its allies. But the successful strike on March 27 painted a very different picture. It revealed that Iran's offensive power was not only intact, but was also becoming more sophisticated and daring. The breach of Prince Sultan Air Base's defenses was a clear signal that the conflict was far from over. It showed that Iran was not just fighting a defensive war, but was actively taking the fight to critical American military hubs, challenging the very foundation of U.S. air superiority in the Gulf. The immediate aftermath of the attack was a scene of chaos and emergency response. Sirens blared across the vast base as damage control teams and medical personnel rushed to the impact zones. Fires burned on the tarmac, where critical aircraft had been parked just hours before. The attack happened less than 24 hours after President Trump had declared the war effectively won and Iran obliterated. The stark contrast between that triumphant declaration and the smoldering wreckage at Prince Sultan Air Base highlighted a widening gap between political rhetoric and the harsh reality of the battlefield. For the soldiers, airmen and Marines at Prince Sultan Air Base, the war felt more dangerous than ever. The human cost of the March 27th attack was immediate and, honestly, pretty painful. As the dust settled, it became clear that the missile and drone impacts had not just struck metal and concrete. According to initial reports from sources on the ground, between 10 and 12 American service members were wounded in the assault. 2 of these individuals were listed in critical condition, fighting for their lives in the aftermath of the explosions. These casualties added to a growing list of Americans hurt in the escalating conflict. Each injury represented a personal tragedy and served as a grim reminder of the real-world consequences of a war that was rapidly intensifying, despite official claims that it was nearing a successful conclusion for the United States. While the U.S. Central Command maintained an official silence, neither confirming nor denying the attack, the material losses were just too significant to hide. Satellite imagery and insider reports confirmed that Iran's projectiles had found their marks with chilling accuracy. The primary targets were not random buildings but specific, high-value aircraft parked on the flight line. Among the assets confirmed to be damaged or completely destroyed were Media Group, KC-135 Stratotanker on damaged runway, burning KC-135 Stratotanker after airstrike, a stock a distribute ox equally, several KC-135 Stratotankers, and at least one E-3 Sentry, also known as an AWACS plane. These were not just ordinary jets, they were the linchpins of American air operations across the entire region, and their loss dealt a crippling blow to the U.S. war effort. The destruction of these aircraft was a strategic victory for Iran. The attackers had bypassed barracks and administrative buildings, focusing instead on the tools that allow the United States to project its power across vast distances. By targeting the aerial refueling tankers and the airborne command and control centers, Iran was effectively trying to break the spine of the American air campaign. Each destroyed aircraft represented millions of dollars in lost hardware, but the true cost was far greater. The loss of these specific planes meant a direct reduction in the U.S. military's ability to conduct. Media Group, long-range bombers and fighter jets on airbase. U.S. Air Force bombers and fighters parked together, a stock distribute equally. Long-range bombing missions, fighter patrols, and surveillance operations over Iran and the wider Gulf. This successful targeting demonstrated a frightening level of intelligence and planning on Iran's part. They knew exactly where the most critical assets were located on the sprawling base, and engineered an attack designed to hit them. The burning hulks of these specialized planes on the Prince Sultan Air Base tarmac served as a powerful symbol. They showed that Iran was not just flinging missiles in hope of hitting something, but was engaged in a methodical campaign to dismantle the logistical infrastructure that sustained the American war machine. The loss of these planes was not a temporary setback, it was a long-term problem that could not be easily fixed. The aircraft destroyed in the March 27th attack were not just expensive, they are, for all practical purposes, irreplaceable in the short term. The KC-135 Stratotanker, a military version of the Boeing 707 airliner, serves as the gas station in the sky for the U.S. Air Force. These aging but essential planes allow fighter jets like the F-22 and F-35, and long-range bombers like the B-2, to stay in the air for extended periods, far beyond what their internal fuel tanks would allow. Without aerial refueling, the reach and endurance of American air power would be severely limited. Most combat missions in the region rely on these tankers to get to their targets and back safely. The problem is that the KC-135 is an old platform. The production line for these aircraft closed down permanently in 1965. The U.S. Air Force currently operates a fleet of around 400 of these planes. And there are no new ones being made. Each one that is destroyed is a permanent loss to the inventory. The intended replacement, the KC-46 Alpha Pegasus, has been plagued by years of production delays and design flaws, meaning it is not yet available in the numbers needed to take over the mission. Losing even a few KC-135s in a combat zone puts immense strain on the remaining fleet, forcing military planners to scale back operations or take greater risks. Equally devastating was the damage to the E-3 Sentry, the Airborne Warning and Control System, AWACS aircraft. Instantly recognizable by the massive rotating radar dome mounted on its fuselage, the E-3 is a flying command and control center. It can monitor a vast area of airspace, tracking enemy aircraft, coordinating friendly fighter jets, and managing the entire air battle from above. With only 31 of these aircraft in the entire U.S. inventory, the loss of even one is a major blow. The E-3 is the quarterback of the air war, providing the situational awareness that gives American pilots a decisive edge in combat. Just like the KC-135, the E-3 Sentry is an aging system with no immediate replacement ready to go. The U.S. Air Force has selected the E-7 Alpha Wedgetail to eventually succeed the E-3. But the first of these new aircraft is not scheduled for delivery until 2027 at the earliest. This means that for the current conflict, the military must make do with the small, aging fleet it already has. The destruction of an E-3 at Prince Sultan Air Base means that a critical eye in the sky has been blinded. This loss degrades the defensive and offensive capabilities of all U.S. and allied forces in the region, making every single mission more dangerous and complex. The devastating attack on March 27th was not an isolated or random act of aggression. It was actually the culmination of a deliberate and systematic campaign by Iran to probe, test, and ultimately cripple American military operations at Prince Sultan Air Base. This strike was reportedly designated Wave 84, and was part of a sequenced offensive that had launched 84 coordinated attack packages across the Gulf region since the war began on February 28th. This larger pattern really reveals a clear strategy. Iran was not just retaliating, but was actively prosecuting a sophisticated war plan aimed at identifying and exploiting weaknesses in U.S. defenses. This methodical approach made the threat far more dangerous than sporadic, undisciplined attacks ever could be. The attacks on PSAB itself showed a clear pattern of escalation and learning. The first significant strike occurred on March 1st, an attack that wounded Sergeant Benjamin Pennington, who tragically later died from his injuries. Just a week before the March 27th assault, another barrage wounded 14 more American personnel. Each attack appeared to be a learning experience for Iran's military planners. They were gathering data on U.S. response times, the effectiveness of Patriot missile defenses, and the locations of critical infrastructure. With each wave, their targeting became more precise, and their tactics more effective, leading directly to the destructive success of the third major strike. This series of attacks demonstrates that Iran was not simply trying to cause terror or chaos. Instead, their goal was tactical and strategic, to dismantle the logistical spine of the American air war. They systematically targeted the very assets that enabled U.S. air dominance. By hitting the refueling tankers, they aimed to shorten the range of U.S. fighters. By hitting the AWACS planes, they aimed to blind the command and control network. This focus on logistics and support infrastructure is a classic military strategy designed to weaken an opponent's ability to fight, rather than trying to confront its strongest combat forces head-on. The precision of the March 27th strike was the most alarming aspect. Satellite data analyzed after the attack confirmed thermal anomalies, intense hotspots, exactly where the large, high-value aircraft were known to be parked on the tarmac. This confirmed that Iran's missiles and drones were not just landing somewhere on the massive base. They were hitting specific targets with remarkable accuracy. This capability suggested a significant advance in Iran's guidance systems and, potentially, the use of human intelligence on the ground. The systematic and increasingly accurate nature of these attacks showed that Iran was fighting a smart war, patiently and methodically taking apart the key components of American military power in the region. The growing success of Iranian attacks is directly linked to a simple but brutal mathematical problem facing the United States and its allies. They are running out of interceptor missiles. Air defense systems like the Patriot rely on firing interceptors, small, fast missiles, to shoot down incoming threats like drones and ballistic missiles. But the sheer volume of Iran's offensive arsenal is overwhelming the defensive stockpiles. This creates a situation of unsustainable air defense arithmetic. Every day the war continues, the balance shifts further in Iran's favor, not because its missiles are unstoppable, but because there are simply too many of them to counter. The numbers starkly illustrate this crisis. In a public statement, Secretary of State Marco Rubio highlighted the disparity, noting that Iran is capable of producing over 100 ballistic missiles every month. In that same period, the United States produces only 6 or 7 of the advanced Peace 3 MSE interceptors used by the Patriot system. This production gap is the central vulnerability. In the first 96 hours of the war alone, U.S. and Gulf partner Patriot batteries fired an astonishing 943 interceptor rounds to fend off Iranian attacks. To put that in perspective, the single U.S. factory that produces these interceptors has an annual output of about 620 units. The U.S. and its allies burned through more than a year and a half's worth of production in just 4 days. This dwindling supply of interceptors forces air defense commanders into an impossible position. They can no longer afford to fire at every single incoming object. Instead, they must practice a form of battlefield triage, analyzing the trajectory of incoming projectiles to guess which ones are targeting critical assets and which might be aimed at empty desert. They have to let some threats get through in order to save their precious few interceptors for the highest priority targets. This defensive gamble means that some missiles and drones will inevitably penetrate the shield, as they did with devastating effect at Prince Sultan Air Base on March 27th. The strategic implication of this interceptor shortage is profound. It means that even the most technologically advanced air defense network in the world can be defeated by a determined adversary with a large enough inventory of cheaper offensive weapons. Iran has weaponized this economic and industrial imbalance. They know that each of their missiles, which are relatively inexpensive to produce, forces the U.S. to fire an interceptor that costs millions of dollars and is slow to replace. This war of attrition is not being fought with soldiers on a front line, but in factories and supply chains. And right now it's a war the United States is losing. A deep and troubling disconnect has emerged between the official narrative coming from Washington and the dangerous reality being experienced by U.S. troops on the ground. On March 26, 2026, less than 24 hours before the devastating attack on Prince Sultan Air Base, President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth projected an image of total victory. They announced that the war was essentially won. citing 10,000 targets destroyed and claiming that Iran's military capabilities had been neutralized. The president confidently declared Iran obliterated. This message of overwhelming success was broadcast to the American public and the world, suggesting the conflict was all but over. For the men and women serving at PSAB, these triumphant statements must have felt like they were describing a different war. While officials in Washington were declaring victory, troops in Saudi Arabia were hunkering down under increasingly frequent and accurate missile attacks. They had witnessed the first attack on March 1st, followed by another that wounded 14 of their colleagues, and then the massive barrage on March 27th that left their base smoldering. Their reality was not one of a defeated enemy, but of a highly capable and determined adversary that was growing more effective with each strike. The war, from their perspective, was not ending. It was getting deadlier. This chasm between rhetoric and reality poses a significant problem for the U.S. war effort. When leadership declares victory prematurely, it can create a false sense of security and make it harder to justify the resources needed to continue the fight effectively. The successful Iranian strike on March 27 directly challenged the administration's narrative. It provided undeniable proof that Iran was not obliterated and that its capacity to inflict serious damage on critical U.S. military assets remained very much intact. The attack served as a brutal fact-check on the optimistic pronouncements emanating from the White House and the Pentagon. The silence from U.S. Central Command in the wake of the attack only deepened the confusion. By neither confirming nor denying the casualties and damage, the military created an information vacuum. This allowed competing narratives to flourish, with Iran claiming extensive destruction and U.S. officials remaining quiet. This lack of transparency can erode trust, both among the public and with regional allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who are urging the U.S. to intensify its campaign against Iran. The conflicting realities, one of decisive victory from Washington and one of a dangerous ongoing struggle from the front lines, made it difficult to understand the true state of the war. The March 27th attack on Prince Sultan Air Base represents a potential turning point in the war, not because of the number of casualties, but because of what it revealed about the nature of modern warfare. It demonstrated that a purely defensive strategy against a peer adversary with a massive missile arsenal is ultimately unsustainable. The United States has the most advanced air defense systems in the world, but they are being overwhelmed by an enemy that can produce offensive weapons far faster and cheaper than the U.S. can produce defensive ones. This has created a scenario where defending American bases and personnel is becoming an unwinnable game of numbers. This attack fundamentally challenges the core assumptions of American military dominance in the region. For decades, the U.S. has relied on its technological superiority and its network of fortified bases to project power. PSAB was the model of such a superbase, protected by layers of advanced technology. Iran's ability to breach those defenses and destroy irreplaceable aircraft on the ground shows that these expensive bases may now be liabilities rather than assets. They are fixed targets for an enemy that can launch attacks from hundreds of miles away with increasing precision, forcing the U.S. into a defensive crouch and draining its most advanced munitions. The implications for the war are immense. If the U.S. cannot guarantee the safety of its most critical aircraft even at its most fortified bases, its ability to conduct a sustained air campaign against Iran is in serious jeopardy. Every mission plan will now have to account for the risk of losing more vital assets on the ground. Military planners may be forced to disperse aircraft to smaller, less defended airfields, making logistics more complicated. Or, they may have to pull these high-value planes out of the region altogether, severely limiting their operational reach. Either option represents a strategic victory for Iran, achieved without ever having to challenge an American fighter jet in the air. Ultimately, the strike on PSAB is a wake-up call. It proves that victory in 21st century conflict is not just about having the best technology, it is also about industrial capacity, supply chain resilience, and sustainable strategy. The grim arithmetic of the missile versus interceptor exchange means that the current U.S. strategy is on a path to failure. The successful Iranian attack has exposed a critical vulnerability at the heart of America's military posture in the Middle East. It forces a difficult question upon leaders in Washington. If you cannot defend your own bases, how can you win the war? The smoldering wreckage at Prince Sultan Air Base provides a somber and unsettling answer.